Church. I want to welcome you back to our Minute with Matt. And in this week's installment, we're going to look at a question that some of you have asked me as we've been reading through Genesis, and particularly here at the end of Genesis, as we've gotten into the story of Joseph and his brothers. Does God intend to bring evil into our lives? It's a great question that many of us have asked and struggled with, especially as we face diseases and suffering and natural disasters, all that kind of stuff. And there's a verse that I want to share with you. This is out of Genesis chapter 50. It's verse 20, and it's Joseph is speaking to his brothers. And I want you to listen to how Joseph describes this. He says, "Even though you intended to do harm to me, God intended it for good, in order to preserve a numerous people as he is doing today." Now, you'll remember in Joseph's story that his brothers sold him into slavery. And it was in that journey into slavery and into Egypt that Joseph found himself becoming the second in command in Pharaoh's household. And as Joseph reflects back on this now towards the end of his life, he's able to look back and say, what you intended to do for harm, what you intended for evil, God intended for good. It reminds us of another passage in the New Testament, where one that many of us have heard before. It's in Paul's letter to the Romans, where he says in verse 8:28, "We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to his purpose." There are times where we face suffering. There are times where we're going to face pain and where we will encounter evil in our world, whether it be through illness or the loss of unexpected loss of loved ones, or through natural disasters. We encounter this evil. We encounter this pain and suffering, and it's never something that God intends for us, but it is something that is present in our world. And God has the power to take what may be intended for evil and use it for good, just as he did here with Joseph. And this is a wonderful example for all of us today, that the pain and the suffering that we face today is still something that God can use. God can use all of that for good. And sometimes it might take years as we look back and think about it and in retrospect, but God is ultimately doing something good. I'm reminded of a quote from Frederick Buechner, one of my favorite theologians. He says, "The worst thing is never the last thing." And we have to remember that even in God's own life through Jesus Christ, that what was intended to bring harm and evil through the death of Jesus Christ, God brought good from that through the resurrection. And so I hope that helps you as you read through the scriptures this week. If you have any questions, feel free to send me an email, matt@roystonfirstumc.org, or you can leave a comment in the section below. Have a great week, and God bless.